Hello Year 3, welcome to what will be Chapter 8 of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Later that day, Lucy and Jem were still in the pool. Mum and Dad were dozing on sun loungers. Nanny appeared on the edge of the diving board in her smart red shoes, her own reflection staring up at her. Jem could see the reflection of her reflection reflected in her big red sunglasses. "I've had an idea," she said. "Mummy and Daddy Tooting have driven their lucky little children halfway round the world. Isn't it time that they had a night off? Why don't you both go out tonight? Cairo is so exciting. You could leave the children here with me. After all, I am a highly trained professional nanny." "Oh, we couldn't," Mum said. "Really, you've done enough for us already. You saved little Harry's life. You let us have a shower. You are too kind." "Nonsense, Mrs. Tooting," said Nanny. "You'd be doing me a favour. My little charge sees so few other children. He'd love to play with Lucy and Jeremy and little Harry." She glanced at the children, and I'm sure they'd enjoy that too. "We'd love it," said Lucy, sliding into the water from the top of the inflatable lobster. "Definitely," said Jem. "Hide and seek," shouted little Harry. "We sleep in, Chitty," said Mum. "If Tom and I are out late, that means the children have to stay up late, after the day we've had." "I did think of that," said Nanny, "and I have a solution. Come and see." Dad and Mum followed Nanny through the palm trees to the gravel drive at the top of the house. This was the first time they'd seen the house properly. The flight of steps that ran down from the front door like a marble waterfall, the fountain splashing in the drive, and the carp flashing in the fountain. The cloisters that spread on each side behind their groves of slender white pillars. Dad didn't notice any of this, because Dad was staring at the car in the drive. It was sleek and small and silver, and so streamlined that it looked like it was speeding even though it was standing still. "It's an Aston Martin," said Nanny. "Aston Martin DB5, sighed Dad. "I used to dream about this car. I know it's very fast and sporty, but it's also got some excellent safety features. For instance," she leaned inside and flipped a switch, and a metal panel rose slowly out of the rear. "Adjustable bulletproof armour." "That could be useful," said Dad. "This button is for the ejector seat just in case, and there are 2 guns housed under the front headlights. You probably won't need them." "Probably not. We were thinking of just going to get a pizza or something, weren't we? Then I won't bother explaining the smokescreen or the rocket launcher. Just enjoy the drive." Dad climbed into the car in a happy daze. Then Mum made him climb out again and sit in the passenger seat. "But I really want to drive it," he complained. "Well, you can't. Look at yourself. You're much too happy to drive. You're practically floating. I'll drive." So she did. Once around the fountain and off down the gravel path. At the gates, Dad looked back suddenly worried about the children. "You know, Julie," he said, "I'm not sure we should be doing this. There's something strange going on. When I spoke to Tiny Jack on the phone in Paris, he was very, very keen to have Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. And Nanny has this phone that looks just like—" Mum winked at him. "You worry too much. Let's hit the town." As soon as the Aston Martin slipped out through the gate, Nanny returned to the children and said, "Right, now the grown-ups are out of the way, let's have some real fun." Jem frowned. He thought they'd been having some pretty real fun already, lolling around in a centrally heated rock pool, drinking lemonade while fish nibbled their toes. But then Nanny said, "To begin with, would you mind if I called you Jem instead of Jeremy?" "No, oh no, I'd like that." "I thought so. I have no idea why grown-ups like these long, curly old names." As she said this, she bent down and pressed a hidden button, and suddenly all the water in the pool was a churning riot of bubbles. "Swim!" shouted little Harry, and jumped right in, not realising he couldn't swim. Jem had to rescue him. "This is nice," he said, "but it must be bad for the fish." "The way I see it," said Nanny, "if you like it, then the fish probably like it too." "Good point," said Lucy. "Enjoy it now, and maybe in a little while Tiny Jack will come and play." So Lucy tried to swim to the bottom while the bubbles streamed into her face, pushing her up again. She flipped over on her back and the bubbles propelled her across the pool like a rocket. It was then that she came to the conclusion that this was so much fun that everything that had happened before was only a fraction of fun. This was complete fun. Jem and little Harry agreed. When the sun sank lower in the sky and they grew chilly, Nanny lit a little bonfire at the side of the pool and gave them sausages and showed them how to cook them in the flames using toasting forks. Afterwards she did the same with marshmallows. Having fun? She smiled. So much fun, said Jem. But what about Tiny Jack? You said he might like to come and play. Silly me. I was having such a nice time, said Nanny. I forgot all about him. What a bad Nanny. I'll go and ask him if he'd like a game of Monopoly or Snakes and Ladders. Does he only like old-fashioned games? Said Jem, feeling a stab of disappointment for the first time since entering Chateau Bateau. Old-fashioned? It's just a house like this. I thought he'd have PlayStations and Xboxes and a Wii. I thought he'd want to play Mario Kart. Mario Kart? What's Mario Kart? It's a game, a racing car game. We each have a steering wheel and you choose a car from all kinds of different designs. Wait, are you talking about a computer game? Said Nanny, because I never let Tiny Jack play with computer games. I think they're bad for children. I like him to play real games. If that's old-fashioned, call me old-fashioned. Well, said Jem, I just thought. He felt a bit guilty. He didn't want to appear ungrateful when they were having such a good time. Nanny didn't seem to notice. She carried on. So, if he wants to play a motor racing game, for instance, I let him use a real car on a real racetrack. It took a moment for this to sink into Jem's and Lucy's brains. So, if we wanted to play a motor racing game right now... Of course, let's go and see what we've got in the toy box. This Chateau Bateau toy box was a building the size of a small church stuck on one side of the chateau itself. The floor was paved with huge versions of board games. There was a Monopoly board game that you could walk around. It had got playing pieces big enough to sit in and pedal, and a massive oak trunk full of money. Excuse me, Nanny, said Lucy. Isn't this real money? Yes, of course. Now this is one of Tiny Jack's favourites. It's just squares with numbers on. Snakes and ladders! Yelled little Harry. Clever boy, little Harry, said Nanny. The ladders are over there. She pointed to a copse of step ladders propped up in the corner. And there are the snakes. She waved her red-painted nails towards a tank of pythons, twisting around each other, sliding up and down the glass. Snakes and ladders with real snakes, said Lucy. Now that is stylish. Lego, said Nanny, pointing to what looked like a building site strewn with mounds of stuff, hods and trucks and wheelbarrows full of the coloured bricks. There was a half-built Lego house that would easily sleep a family of 4, and a helicopter that looked like it might really fly. But much as he loved Lego, Jem looked at Nanny when she said, We also have racing cars, Jem. You love to play with racing cars, don't you? Jem didn't want to be rude, but the last racing cars he'd seen were the ones that Dad had installed in his bedroom. Why couldn't people just be happy with nice, safe, tidy computer versions that didn't whiz past you or send electric sparks up your nose? We've got a blue one and a red one, said Nanny. Just like Dad's, thought Jem. They're in here. She led them into a bright, airy room, and there were the cars. They were exactly like Dad's ones. The only difference was that Dad's were little plastic models and these were real racing cars. Who's going to be red and who's going to be blue? Asked Nanny. Me red! Shouted little Harry and toddled off towards the blue car. No, no, Harry, you're too little, said Lucy, picking him up. So are we, she added quickly. We can't drive. I actually can, said Jem. Honestly, I think I can. Really? He couldn't bear the idea of not getting into one of those racing cars. Yes, but we're not allowed to drive. We don't have licences. Nanny shrugged.
Neither does Tiny Jack. Of course not, said Jem. He's too little. Exactly. Nanny pointed a remote control device at the door. It flashed and beeped and rose to reveal a black racing track,
smooth as satin, snaking off through the gardens of Chateau Bateau. What if we crash? Said Lucy. You almost certainly will. It's half the fun, said Nanny, smiling. Don't worry about the cars. They're pretty indestructible. I was worrying about us. I'm not worried, said Jem, and he jumped into the seat of the red car. Everyone knows red is fastest. The moment he got in, the arms of the seat closed round him and held him tight. There was a faint whirring noise as a mechanical arm hoisted a padded helmet onto his head. It did all feel very safe. Me driving, yelled little Harry. No, little Harry, said Lucy, climbing into the blue car. It's not safe. You stay with Nanny. Oh, but he will be driving, said Nanny, as the seat folded its arms round Lucy. They're remote-controlled cars. She passed little Harry a console with a little driving wheel on it, just like the ones that Dad had used for the toy cars. Little Harry pressed the button gleefully, and Jem's car lurched forward at terrifying speed, then stopped suddenly. Nanny was in charge of the blue car. Clearly she'd spent many happy hours over the years playing with remote control cars, and now it slid smoothly round the track with Lucy in the driver's seat, easing into bends and hurtling down the straights.
Little Harry, on the other hand, had never played with remote control cars before. I don't know
if you've ever ridden in a full-size turbocharged racing car operated by an inexperienced 3-year-old, but it's not an experience you'd ever forget. Jem's car spun and skidded round the first bend, then pootled very slowly down the straight bit, before powerfully accelerating into a terrifying chicane. Jem was buffeted from side to side as the car fishtailed from left to right. His brain was so pulverized that he almost forgot to scream with terror as the car hurtled towards a huge ramp that ended in mid-air. Right on the brink of the drop, the car screeched to a halt. Then, very, very slowly, it slid backwards down the ramp. Phew, thought Jem. Then, without any warning, the car raced up the ramp again, hit the end and rocketed into the air. Jem screwed up his eyes and heard the wind whistling past his ears. Then the car thumped down on the other side. A second later, Lucy's car landed deftly next to his and sped quietly on its way, already on its second lap. After the first terrifying circuit, little Harry began to get the hang of the controls, and Jem began to enjoy the sound of the engine growling like a box of angry bears, the sunset washing over the broad glossy bonnet, the fragrance of the wind that blew in his face. The orange-scented sunset turned to moonlight, and Jem noticed that he hadn't seen Lucy's car for a couple of laps. The stars came out. The air grew chill. Still Jem was going round and round the racetrack all on his own. "Hello," he called. "Hello? Would someone stop the car, please?" No one answered. No sound but the growl and squeal of the car as it sashayed through bends and leapt over the ravine again and again, faster and faster with each lap. "Hello?" called Jem. "Excuse me," as he thundered into a steep bend, banking right at the tip of the track. Oh! The engine had stopped dead. The car slithered down from the top of the track and rolled over twice onto the verge, ending up on its back. When Jem crawled free, the first thing he saw was Lucy looking down at him with little Harry in her arms. Nanny put her finger to her lips, telling Jem to shush, then pointed at little Harry. "Fast asleep," she whispered. "He dropped off right on top of the remote control. We tried to prise it out from underneath him or sneak it out of his hands, but he kept waking up and objecting." "I've got him now," Lucy smiled. "Let's put him to bed. Come on, Jem, let's go and open up Chitty." "No," said Nanny. "No sleeping in Chitty tonight. Tonight you'll sleep in proper beds." Proper beds. Until Nanny said those words, Jem and Lucy had been perfectly comfortable sleeping in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Yes, it was a bit cramped. Yes, the beds were really only shelves with thin mattresses on, but it was warm and cosy and nice to lie there, chatting while the stars popped out. The phrase proper beds made them remember what it was like to have space to roll over in the night, to stretch out to read under the duvet. They were so tired by then that proper beds seemed even more exciting than real racing cars. Bats were flitting in and out of the pillars as they followed Nanny along the moonlit cloister, up the broad white steps, and into the house itself.
The floor of the entrance hall was tiled black and white squares, like the checkered flag in motor racing.
Dangling from the ceiling was an enormous chandelier made of hundreds of little cardboard pine trees, like the air fresheners you see in cars. Standing on the floor was a massive silver statue of St. Christopher, the patron saint of motorists. At his feet was a big model of a dog made of some sort of furry material. As Nanny led the children past, the dog's head nodded slowly up and down. All the lamps looked like various kinds of car headlights, and the banisters were huge chrome bumpers.
"Tiny Jack really does like cars," said Jem.
Nanny smiled. "He really does."
"We never played with him," said a sleepy Lucy. "Maybe tomorrow," said Nanny.
All the way up the stairs were framed photographs of Tiny Jack. There was one of him eating a Toblerone. Next to him the chocolate bar looked as big as a ladder. "He really is small," said Lucy.
"He really is."
Nanny smiled again, as though being small was a great achievement. "Now it's time for bed." She opened a door that was unusual for a bedroom door, yellow, made of metal with a shiny handle and a little window, but would have looked perfectly normal on a New York taxi cab. The room inside, though, looked nothing like the inside of a car. Well,
the picture window did have windscreen wipers, and the mirror did look like a big rear-view mirror.
But apart from that, it just looked like a very comfortable bedroom. A log fire blazed merrily in the grate, and by its warm flickering light the children saw 3 big beds made up in crisp white linen. Beside each bed was a little table, and on each table was a glass of milk, a torch, and a choice of books. On each pillow was a neatly folded pair of cotton pyjamas. Just looking at those pyjamas made you feel dreamy and contented.
The wall and ceiling around Lucy's bed were painted matte black.
Lucy clapped her hands and said, "How did you know?"
Nanny didn't answer. She quickly and quietly turned down one of the duvets so that Lucy could slip little Harry underneath without waking him.
Then she wished them pleasant dreams and tiptoed out.
It was the best night's sleep Lucy had ever had.
Every now and then she woke in the night, but only just enough for her to have that delicious feeling you get when you realise it's still not morning and you can go back to sleep. Jem, on the other hand, didn't sleep a wink. At first it was because he was so excited. He wanted to tell Dad all about driving the racing cars. Then he didn't sleep because he was thinking, why aren't they back yet? And why are there so many snakes in this place? And why didn't we ever see Tiny Jack?
And that is the end of
Chapter 8.
More tomorrow.